Let's get started here. Thank you everybody for joining us on this wonderful Friday morning. No matter where you are in the world, could be morning, afternoon, maybe even evening, depending on where you're all based. So we're so happy that you guys are able to join us for this session. This is again virtual internships, and we are going to be discussing the drivers, outcomes, and delivery of remote internships. So we have a lot of absolutely great content, a lot of data that we're going to be sharing with you. And basically the overview of this presentation, we're going to be splitting it up into 4 separate parts, 15 minutes each. So we'll be starting off here very shortly, giving you a brief introduction of myself and my wonderful co-presenter. And then we're going to spend about 15 minutes discussing the drivers of remote, how we arrived at where we are now in this very virtual-esque environment. We're spending 15 minutes on the current outcomes, reviewing the data on which a lot of these virtual internship programs and what we've compiled, and then discussing another 15 minutes on remote delivery and best practices to delivery in these virtual internship programs. So if you want to take a 15-minute break, have something else coming back, you can come back for the current outcomes, and then we'll be spending 15 minutes discussing different Q&A. So do feel free. Ask any questions at all in the chat on the MACE homepage or the web page that you guys are at, and we will come by and discuss it at the very end. So do feel free to ask as many questions as you can. So to kick things off, I am joined here by my wonderful co-presenter and colleague, Jillian Lowe. She's our Chief Academic Officer at Virtual Internships. My name is Andy Radlett, and I am the Partnerships Development Manager in the Americas region, North and South America. So we're going to be presenting you with a little bit of background about virtual internships in itself. Virtual internships started in very early 2018, really recognizing that the future of work was upon us. So we are a work experience provider that connects students with global host companies and facilitation of these high impact remote work programs. So we really focus on, yes, we do connect the student to the internship and the host companies all around the world, but we really focus on the scaffolding and support for the student throughout the entire life cycle of the program, really focusing on, yes, those hard skills in the students' chosen career field of choice, but really focusing on those soft skills as well, and really preparing these students for this virtual-esque and hybrid remote work models, and preparing students for the future of work. And over the past 3 years, we've had the privilege of supporting about 2,500 students on our program as well. So a little bit of background about us. Now I'm going to be handing it over to Jillian Lowe, my colleague, who's going to be discussing the drivers to remote internships.
Wonderful. So thank you all for joining us on this Friday morning or afternoon. I hope that you've enjoyed the conference thus far, and I'm really excited to kind of go in a 15-minute punch about the drivers to remote internships. I really think it's an amazing opportunity for us to kind of reflect on remote work. And a lot of times now, because of what happened in 2020, we kind of think pandemic equals remote work equals the creation of remote work. And really, that's not the truth. And when we all reflect on it, we can know that that's not the truth, that remote work was a long simmering build up, and that there was a lot of different drivers and a lot of different impacts that really brought us to where we are today. And it wasn't just from the pandemic, which absolutely amplified all the focus on remote work and the ability to work remotely, but it wasn't the only thing. So first, if we go way back in time, most all work was remote. It was all done from the comfort of our homes when we were blacksmiths, farmers, and more. And then we had the Industrial Revolution, which really urbanized us, brought us into cities, brought us into big companies, into factories and more, and we started commuting. Now that's a lot of details and that's really quick. So my timeline really just starts in 1970, where we have these great urban centers, we have people working, we have people doing things, but all of a sudden we have an oil crisis. And so what happened in 1970s is actually teleworking and flex work were both coined terms first coined then. And they were really coined because first a NASA consultant wanted to kind of promote that we could decrease traffic, we could decrease gridlock by allowing people to have telecommuting or working from home. Then in a Washington Post article to save oil and gas and promoting this, we just started discussing the term of the coined flex work. This moves to 1980, where IBM started to experiment with remote work. They would actually install huge terminals into their employees' homes and allow them to work remotely. Fast forward 30 years, and all of a sudden, 40% of IBM's staff in 2009 were actually working remotely. So this was happening long before the COVID pandemic. And in 2010, we could see that it was also gaining steam, even without the outside forces of the pandemic. So in the 2010 census, they actually reported that hybrid work increased by over 35% over the past decade, with 10% of the over 150 million workers working at least hybridly at some part of their work week. And then between 2005 to 2020, we had this great impact of different trends. We had more collaborative tools like Slack and Zoom come about. We had the first co-working space in San Francisco in 2005 come about. And we just had a lot of companies embracing the world of remote work. And in fact, from 2014 to 2018, companies that were fully remote, no headquarters, no office space, jumped from 26 to 170. And then, of course, we all know the wonderful story. 2020 happened and we all went remote. And looking at that, before the pandemic, we still had these drivers bringing us to remote. So first, like I said, in the 1970s, we had environmental pressures. We had oil prices, traffic, and environmental concerns leading us to question, is commuting to work day in and day out really the best answer? And then we had, of course, that technology. We had people with personal computers, Wi-Fi, co-working spaces, collaborative tools, CRM systems, and more, all being built into this computer that we could now take anywhere we went and access anywhere we went. And that was really driving the ability for companies to think innovatively of how they engage with their employees. And a huge driver was the generational work habits. We know that over the past decade, millennials overtook the majority of presence in the workforce, and that their workplace habits and their focus were very different than the boomers and the Gen X before them. They were focused on a work-life balance, and they were more likely to job hop a lot more than boomers, which means that employers needed to start thinking, how am I going to retain my staff? How am I going to attract my staff? And how am I going to make them happy as they seek flexible work opportunities, which led to more and more seeking and promoting flexible work options, whether it was one day or full time. Outside of these drivers of remote work, we of course had one huge big push off the cliff, and that is the pandemic. So on the left side of the screen, this is just a really small snapshot of 2020 October. I'm doing this snapshot because, as we know, a lot has changed between October and June, right? Right now, we're sitting at 50 to 70% of the US population that is working, vaccinated. We're looking at what we're calling a new normal, and things are changing a little bit in reverse with people getting called back to the office. But what we had in October 2020 is that prior in 2019, reports noted that 20% of eligible workers, those who could work remotely, were doing so. And all of a sudden that skyrocketed to 71% of eligible workers working from home in 2020. Now, I think if you can remember back to June last year, we kind of hated that remote work. We were managing Zoom for the first time. We were yelling at coworkers that they were on mute constantly. We were trying to navigate the pressures of the pandemic and more. But even with all of that change, come October, 54% of remote workers wanted to continue working from home after the COVID was kind of rectified. Now, out of all of this, some other trends happened. One, we started getting tons of data from remote workers because all of a sudden we had tons of remote workers, and we had tons of remote workers who were now seeing that this could happen, right? Prior to 2020, a lot were like, nope, we can't do it. I don't trust my workers. I won't be productive. They won't do what they need to. But we found that in one study of productivity, Deloitte found that the perceived productive capacity was not actually negatively impacted when an employee worked from home. And in fact, only 1 in 4 think their productivity was suffering outside. Moreover, in 2020, Gartner actually released a report that 90% of HR leaders now indicate they completely trust their employees from home, where if you ask them in 2019, that number would not have been as high. And moreover, the employees believe they're productive from home. And even in fact, 75% believe they are as or more productive. And what we know that we're seeing in trends right now is that everybody who's working from home wants it more. A Harvard study released last month found that 81% of employees either don't want to return to the office or would like to prefer a hybrid schedule, with 27% wanting to work remote fully. And so we can see that all these trends are kind of building to this passion for remote work, this increased requirement for flexibility, and that there is kind of this looming dread of, you've heard probably the great resignation of employees quitting because they don't want to go back into the office or seeking other things, and employers needing to attract their staff better back to the office through this flexible workplace. So how does this impact internships, right? Because we're talking about internships in this presentation. And what we have is roughly 40% of American workers have jobs that can be completed remotely. So 60% need to go into the office, and this could be all the way from a server to a dentist, right? There's a whole slew of different industries where it really can only be done in person. But of those 40% that can do remote, it's really a skewed demographic, because according to the Pew Research, workers' education level is a key determinant to whether they can hold jobs that may be remote. In fact, 62% of workers with a bachelor's degree or more education had jobs that could be performed remotely, which is nearly triple the share of those with no post-secondary education. For us as career service providers, universities, and pathway providers, it means that the demographic that we're working with, these students in university, are the ones who are most likely to work remote in the future, needing the skills, the experiences, and the opportunities to do so. Moreover, in a PwC survey of around 700 CEOs, 78% agree that remote collaboration is here to stay. PwC is not the only study that's been reported on this, and many more have said, yep, I have embraced it, I've appreciated it, it's going to be here for the long term. But what we have also is, while there's this huge focus on remote work and how it's here to stay and how university students are more likely to work remotely in the future, meaning that they'll need the skills and experiences of that, we also know that internships are down across the board. 50% are estimated to have been canceled last summer due to the global pandemic. And Indeed recently noted that the share of internship postings is down 15% from 2020 and 39% from 2019. So we have students who need remote work experience. We have students who just need experience in general. And now we don't have enough internships to really kind of get that fill of all these students. And so how remote internships and the drivers of remote work is going to impact it is it's going to impact how we teach professional development, how we teach how students get work experience and how they access work experience, which could be done remotely moving forward. And it means that there is going to be this focus on transitions from university and tertiary education to the remote workforce. So with knowing that the future is on their doorstep, that COVID kind of paved the way, and now we're looking at how do you manage in-person and remote, hybrid, and all these kind of things, we do have to look at what is the data saying? Is remote internships good? Is there actually information about it? And what I would say is, no, there's very little information. I wish at the bottom of my heart that we had so much more data. But there are some different cool papers that have come out in the last 4 months. One, IIE and AIFS did an article that was focused on global remote internships, but it was titled "The Rise of Remote Global Internships, Promising Practices and the Implications for Career Readiness," which is linked in our slides. Virtual Internships ourselves actually wrote an article, a white paper titled "Starting the Debate on Remote versus In-Person Internship Skills Gate." And the Wisconsin Center on Education Research also did a paper exploring online internships amidst the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, results from a mixed method study. So of these 3 big papers, I'm going to look at the 2, virtual internships and the WCER, as IIE and AIFS was, one, so globally focused it might not be for the NACE audience, and 2, it actually quoted our paper a lot, which means a lot of the information is quite similar. So I'll just kind of cut that in half and make it kind of work for both. So looking first at starting the debate on remote versus in-person skills game, we have at Virtual Internships this passion for remote work, and we've been doing internships long before COVID. But COVID did bring up the conversation a lot more. It brought up the opportunity and the discussion. And what we found was that there was this big question of, can remote internships stand up against in-person? Now, if we're starting a company all about virtual internships, we clearly think it can, with the right support, structure, and more, but it doesn't mean that the proof wasn't in the pudding. And so what we wanted to do is, in that moment of 2020, did we have the data to compare apples to apples, or potentially in-person to remote, and could we actually make it not apples to oranges, but apples to apples? And what we found was that we could. So Virtual Internships does have a sister company, CRCC Asia, that does in-person internships. And both of the programs are really highly aligned to the NACE 8 career readiness competencies. As you can see, these 8 NACE competencies are going to be the old versions, because what I am is looking at the data when we were framing it based on the old 8 competencies. So I promise, I know they've updated it. We're updating our programs to reflect that. But at this point in the time of our data, it were these 8 competencies that were noted. And all of the programming inclusions for both the in-person and virtual opportunities were grounded in this. So the online curriculum, coaching calls, webinars, workshops, and skills assessments. So we did have like-for-like data. The programs were similar in a lot of ways. There was a placement guarantee. There was an online program curriculum. There was project-based placements with experienced host companies. We all work on a framework of career fields and allowing a student to pick a career field and have a placement aligned directly to that career field, whether it be engineering, healthcare, or whatnot. And it all has a really structured program support with check-ins, guidance, and more. Now, there were program differences, of course, right? There's program location. You can't really take it away when you put someone in a different city to do an internship versus they hang back behind their computer. The online program curriculum was different because you're focusing on an in-person internship or the nuances of a remote internship. And Virtual Internships offers individual coaching where CRCC Asia didn't, and hours per week were a little varied, where Virtual Internships has a max of 30 hours due to the remote nature, and CRCC Asia naturally put everybody at a full-time internship due to the in-person nature. But what we did have was a skills assessment. And what we wanted to look at was, were the students perceiving skills gain at the same rate in person and in remote internships? So each of the programs were built around a 24 question or 3 questions per competency skills assessment. Basically, it was on a Likert scale of never to always, and the questions looked at, to what extent do you exercise sound reasoning to analyze issues, make decisions, and overcome problems? And then they would rate it on that Likert scale. We did want to make sure that the students understood this, so it was always, the skills were always really clearly articulated and explained in our curriculum, and it was even explained in the assessment of what does it look like, giving examples. Once we had that data, what we would then do is assess, was there a gain? So pre-internship and post-assessment, what did the student assess their skills at? And what we would consider is either if they moved 1 point in the positive or negative direction, they had a gain or loss. And if they moved 2 points, they had a significant gain or loss. And ultimately, what we were able to do is kind of clean the data and make sure we could compare these 2 data sets. So what we had in 2019 was CRCC Asia supported 1,041 students. And at the time of doing the data analysis, Virtual Internships supported 1,592 students in 2020. What we had was different locations. CRCC Asia only provided internships in Asia. So what we did was we removed all placements from Virtual Internships that were outside of Asia to ensure that kind of those cultural impacts of vertical hierarchy, language skills, and more didn't impact the skills assessment. We also looked at the duration to ensure that there was comparable durations of 4, 8, or 12 weeks in both of the skills, the data. And we wanted to make sure that we did have the full data. So we had to ensure that all the students had completed the pre and the post. And that is one of the hardest things for us to get. So about 142 completed their internship in Eastern Asia and had the pre and post assessment fully completed. And finally, of virtual internships, we had 216 that were pre and post and in Eastern Asia. And what this data told us was, 1, Post-program, 75% of in-person participants noted increased confidence in obtaining post-graduation employment compared to 88% of remote participants. Moreover, 3.25% is the average difference in skills gain perceived by students in a remote versus in-person internship experience. So this kind of showed us that virtual opportunities were meeting the competition when it came to skills gain, with in-person opportunities with leadership, communication, intercultural fluency, and professional and work ethic showing almost identical gains between these two sets of students. So right here, we do have the skills gain. We look at the 8 competencies as they were in 2020, and you can kind of see the difference of in-person leading critical thinking, but career management, but others like professionalism, leading in remote as well. And in my report, which is linked in the actual NACE session, you can download, you can read all about us breaking down each one of the 8 career fields, the different gains, the notices, and the student testimonials around that of the qualitative data. Now, moving beyond that, we did just have a new report kind of released, which is exploring online internships amidst the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Of which Inside Higher Ed actually did a whole article stating remote internships show dismal results. And I did just mess up the title of that, but Inside Higher Ed did have a very glaring negative article about remote internships not being as promising. Now, what we have is this great report that does 3 different case studies of a mixed methods research. And what they found was, 1, that the majority of all interns, in-person, hybrid, and online, noted satisfaction in their internship, but online was notably lower. More so, the really important one is that the data captured was between November 2020 and March 2021 of the previous 12 months. So essentially all data captured was when we were going through the hellfire of the pandemic. And that some of the big concerns of the report was, 1, that networking remains a concern of virtual internships. That loss of water cooler culture and more is always that big conversation. And the data shows that hybrid internships experienced the highest rate of feeling that their internship had expanded their professional network, followed by in-person and online. While still they did have an experience of increased network on all 3 internship types, online was lagging. And finally, internship participation during COVID pandemic was low. I think this is no surprise to anyone. 22.1% of students taking an internship compared to around 30% of their reports in 2017-19. And roughly 50% took online, 50% took in person. And so it's really amazing how this kind of data came out. But what I would say is it's not as damning as it looks. There's actually some really good positives that came out of this report in the name of online internships. 1, like this report is great, but it doesn't really take into that COVID impacted internships. The data reflects all internships delivered under duress, with online being the first time for many companies, being planned extremely quickly and during a global pandemic. And that can make things a little wonky when you deliver it. Companies across the United States had prepared and delivered and refined their in-person internships. They had not refined their remote internships. And so if there was satisfaction, it could be because of unbiased towards students not wanting to have done a remote internship in the first place. And it could be because there wasn't the program supports there, where when Virtual Internships is looking at our data, we had prepared long before COVID to deliver an in-person virtual internship, to prepare the scaffolding around a remote internship. And that can change the quality perception. But the other good data was, 1, that mentorship and supervision was deemed the same across all 3 types of internships. So both in-person and hybrid interns continue to report having a relatively high quality of mentoring, which refers to how well a supervisor assists the intern. This was the same for online internships as well. So all 3 types of interns said, hey, yes, I had a great rapport with my supervisor and I learned something from them. And ultimately, that's the goal of an internship, to learn something from that supervisor and be immersed into the ambiguity of work. The report did clearly note that more support is needed. The report notes that online internships needed to be designed with greater attention to task design, supervision, and communication. That is at the core of what we at Virtual Internships want to do, and it's what more and more companies will really need to take a look at. And finally, it did kind of highlight what we already knew. is that there's a need to increase participation of internships across the US demographic of university students. In both online and in-person internships, we still have low participation across all caretaker incomes, whether it's affluent or not, first generation or continuing generation students. And the demographics and the pathways need to be created to support everybody and to get everybody on an internship. So what this leads to is a potential to review the successful program delivery. So I'll let Andy take it away for here.
Thank you so much, Jillian. Obviously Jillian just went over a huge, really a great overview of all the data and everything that kind of goes into ultimately what our mission is. And when we were creating this program, there's a lot that goes into this, right? And it is one of the things we just mentioned. There's not a lot of data out there for virtual internships. That was one thing that Jillian just mentioned. And when we were creating this program, really look at it holistically. And what did we want to address? What are the barriers? What are the barriers to remote work? And ultimately, it kind of came up that lack of direct engagement from supervisor, along with an active workload, obviously is number one. Ensuring that there's a sense of community and network amongst interns. The students are sitting in their rooms or in their offices, and who are they going to speak to? Things like that. And then obviously delivering the adequate amount of academic support to unpack the challenges and really the successes and ultimately improve employability, which is the whole concept of this program in itself too. So that's what we had to really look at when it comes to creating this program. So here's what we did. And Jillian, you can move on. Next slide. We created this program that encompasses and really kind of focuses on what these barriers are and really kind of focus on, well, how can we improve this experience in itself? And we created this very customized model where students can choose to work 1, 2, 3, or 4 months long. And even within that, they could choose to work 10, 20, or 30 hours per week. It's completely customized to the student or university, depending on the partnership. The only really restriction that we put on that is that the student needs to work a minimum of 120 hours total. So that could be 30 hours per week for 1 month. That could be 10 hours per week for 3 or 4 months. Doesn't matter, as long as the student does hit that 120 hour threshold. And that's really for a number of different reasons. Obviously for the intern itself, it's great to get that, the more hours that they're actually working and working on projects, connecting with supervisor, colleagues, and things like that, the better. The more they're actually exposed to the environment, the better. And then we look at it from the host company's perspective too. In order for students to get really involved in these high impact and dynamic projects, there has to be a certain level of commitment. So there's a lot of discussion on this. We ultimately did, choose that 120 hours was the ultimate threshold. And again, that could be completed, doesn't matter, as long as the time frame kind of fits into the 1, 2, 3, or 4 months. Now, in terms of the support, each student is assigned an intern experience manager from day one of enrolling in the program. And that intern experience manager is really the student's main support, their best friend internally with us throughout that entire process. And we're basically helping them throughout the entire life cycle. That goes into the virtual interviews before the student is even connected with their host company. That goes into the onboarding, and even the virtual internship itself, once they are working with their host company. Because yes, the student is still assigned a supervisor at their respective host company, but the intern experience manager is always in the background, on a very weekly basis, if not daily basis, checking in with the intern to ensure everything's okay. Obviously for quality assurance, but ensuring that the actual experience of the internship is going well. We also have embedded a full online curriculum. We'll back up. Yeah, we've also embedded a full online curriculum called Career Bridge, which is a full global internship, which is a global internship concept that we've developed internally that really focuses on, obviously the future of work, remote working in itself, and establishing those global international career competencies and that sort of thing. If a student wants to work with a company in China, resumes in China look a lot different than they do in the US. Same goes for the UK, Belgium, Africa. No matter where the student wants to work with these host companies, there's a lot of different these cultural differences there when it comes to the professional work environment. Career Bridge, that's just one of the courses on Career Bridge, and it ultimately goes throughout the entire life cycle of the program. Also, in terms of these internship placements, these are all vetted companies in a number of different ways. So in order for the host company to ultimately become one of our host companies, there's a number of different hoops that they have to go through. And one thing we do emphasize is the project-based model. Basically what that means is, no, if a student is placed with a company in Singapore and they're currently in Chicago, that's a heck of a time difference right there. No, the student does not have to rearrange their sleep schedule and work 9 to 5 Singapore time. That makes no sense and ultimately defeats the purpose. These are all project-based. It's a project-based model where students are assigned projects, maybe that last 2 to 3 days, sometimes 2 to 3 weeks. Depends on obviously the specifics of the internship, but that allows the student to really gain that project management, that time management experience, and ultimately prepare them in that state. And that's one thing that if you were to just Google the future of work right now, the World Economic Forum actually has an article that really focuses on project-based work is the future. That's it. No matter if your supervisor is in your time zone or on the other side of the world, that's what that kind of these hybrid models and these full remote models are focused on, is these project-based. And then again, another aspect of the program is that 360-degree student support through these online curriculums. And one of the barriers mentioned in the previous slide was this students' access to this global network. We do want the interns, no matter what their host company is, the interns on the program to be connected with each other. And that kind of goes in through these weekly check-ins that are hosted by intern experience managers in these webinars, these chat rooms that we have, and really kind of focuses that these students can expand their network, yes, with their host company, but really with other interns on the program as well. Now, one thing that I want to highlight too, that we've implemented in the program is internship coaching. And that's again done internally with us. Throughout the entire life cycle of the internship, the student conducts 2 different coaching calls. One at the midpoint, designed to really unpack that full first half of the internship and focus on the second half. What can be improved? What's been going well, but what can the improvements been made for how the work's being conducted, for their overall mindset for the program, and focusing on improvements. The end point of and then the second coaching call is done at the very conclusion of the internship, unpacking and debriefing the entire experience. Still, yes, focusing on the future. If a student just completed an internship in finance and their goal is to be an investment banker down the line, that ending internship coaching call is really designed to formulate that pathway to move forward, formulate and really touch upon how this experience will benefit them in attaining that goal, focusing on, yes, those hard skills that they've developed within the finance industry, but also focusing on those soft skills that I mentioned before, how to frame this on a resume, how to frame this in a job interview, and really kind of unpacking and really focusing on that experience in itself. And students who completed their coaching calls, this is one thing that we've gotten from our data, the rated the program satisfaction of an average of 1.2 points on a scale of 1 to 10, higher than those who didn't. That just goes to show you that these support systems are ultimately improving the experience in themselves. We're not just connecting the student to the host company and saying good luck. We're there and kind of focusing on this whole thing. And internship coaching is one of the biggest, most influential things that we do. The next thing that we do are these weekly checkpoints. And I know I touched on this a little bit as well. And that these really come between it's the relationship between the student and the intern experience manager. Yes, the student is doing their internship, working 10, 20, or 30 hours per week with their assigned supervisor, but the intern experience manager is really kind of going along, kind of this guardian angel type thing, where we're checking in with these students 1 time per week, where we ask the students to complete a very brief checkpoint form, basically having the student just give an overview of what the projects they've been assigned, what they're actually working on at this current time, and really what their thoughts are on the internship. And we developed a back-end model where, if the student mentions certain aspects of the program or aspects of the internship that they're not liking or maybe struggling with, that's where the intern experience manager comes in, and we ask to connect with the student on a call to really discuss, again, what maybe the issues are, what maybe some of the good stuff are, really focus on compiling a plan of action to improve on this sort of thing too. Yes, it's quality assurance ultimately for the program, but it's really kind of focusing on a challenge that arises at work. helping the student develop that mindset into kind of compromising a solution to ultimately improve that. With these students, again, mainly undergraduate college students, but yes, some graduate students as well too. This is their first virtual internship. This is sometimes their first internship in itself, whether in person or remote. But in most cases, almost every case, this is the first time that they're actually getting exposure to remote working. There's always issues that come up, whether or not projects that they're not really sure how to complete. If their supervisor assigns them a project that's all clearly laid out, but maybe there's one finer detail that stops the students in their track. Should the intern just stop what they're doing and just wait for the supervisor who's in Singapore sleeping at this time? Or should they maybe work around the problem, solve the issue, and ultimately put a plan of action in place? So there's a number of different things that come up with these weekly checkpoints. We're constantly providing this communication loop with the intern to ensure that this experience is being maximized to the full potential. So in terms of these stats, again, this is just an overview of our program. We've hosted about a little over 1,600 participants between April 2020 and March 2021. But in total, again, this goes back to before March and a little bit into now. We've supported about 2,500 interns to date. 94%, the vast majority of our students do come from university or partnerships with organizations. We do obviously have students that find us off Google, but is in that very, very small and very, very small percentage. So the vast majority of our students are coming from pipelines from universities. It could be, career centers. It could be study abroad. It could be experiential learning. It can be international student services, or our programs have actually been implemented into various academic departments, business schools, engineering schools, things along that nature too. And that really kind of speaks to where a lot of the funding is coming from. And it also provides these students access to credit. Our programs are accredited. There is a school of record that we do work with for students that, do participate on their own and individually. But again, this does kind of widen the opportunities and gives these students the opportunity to provide these sort of things. Currently, we have about 3,500 host companies from just under 80 countries worldwide. And these host companies are split up across 18 different industries or career fields in some cases. When these host companies do ultimately partner with us, some host companies want to just hire one intern. Some host companies will hire 2 or 3 different interns, but each internship is completely different. It's in terms of a compiled project placement plan. So yes, 3,500 companies. These numbers are constantly being added. I'm sure we've added a couple dozen more in the past couple of days. So these numbers are constantly kind of changing and that sort of thing, constantly improving. But we have a host company network again of that expands to the vast majority of the countries around the world. Now, in terms of these outcomes, these are what everyone's this is what everyone wants to hear about too. Is 90% of these participants do agree that completing a virtual internship increased their ability to work remotely. I would certainly hope so. That's certainly our mission too. And 28% of these students have actually been asked to extend the internship or ultimately have been offered a paid contract or full-time employment. This is actually Now, the vast majority of interns are obviously maybe in their first, second, third year and have to go back to school, so not all can accept, but that's certainly reassuring. That just speaks to the quality that these host companies really value in these interns, value that the work that the interns have been provided, and really the success of the projects that they've been assigned. And 88% of participants agree that this experience increased their confidence in obtaining employment post-graduation. That's huge and a little bit unexpected, to be honest with you, in terms of how this experience is impacting these students when it comes to getting that next job or preparing for that next step. Going back to my what I was talking about a few slides ago, where if a second year student who just completes an internship in finance and ultimately wants to be an investment banker down the line, that's one thing we really focus on is, yes, again, those hard skills, but focusing on those soft skills, making them really realize, it's almost more valuable to have those soft skills than those hard skills. So we're really kind of focusing in on that, and we're really pleased to see these numbers. Now, looking to the future, right? That's the biggest thing. And ultimately what it comes down to is, yes, we have this and we're really trying to, we really feel that we've created this model that ultimately will benefit these students in preparation for this sort of thing. So we are really kind of preparing in that sort of thing and really focusing on how to always implement this sort of thing and really kind of looking at the future trends of remote internships. We're always trying to focus on obviously professional development, embedding remote internships into as much as we can, improving online experiences, and ultimately impact hiring decisions as well too. So professional development, back to my first point, professional development. We're trying to embed, we really feel it, in higher education, there's going to be a huge shift and huge implementation of embedding these professional development courses to address these remote working skills. A lot of, if you look at the job market, it's completely changing now, as Jillian did touch upon. We really feel like there's going to be a trend in universities establishing these key skills within these courses that are already developed and ultimately working on these best practices. To take it a step further, we really feel that there's going to be embedding of these remote internships or these remote career readiness or work experience into these opportunities as well. Can providers and universities work better together to create embedded courses? That's certainly our hope for all second year students, and maybe they can get that paid experience down the line too. There's also going to be a trend of just improved online experiences, right? And that ultimately comes from obviously what's happened this past year. But we feel that, over this past year, we feel in some ways, a lot of the outcomes might have been skewed because everything happened so suddenly where 1 week everything's fine. The next week, as we all can remember back in March, everybody was home quarantining. That's not much of a preparation time. And a lot of this, people were caught completely off guard. We feel that with time and preparation, there's going to be a major improvement of these online experiences when it comes to, the additional planning, the focus and intention, because we have a lot of this data now. We really know now that a lot of it does work, but what can we do better? It's still such a new concept, and we really feel like there's going to be improvement with that sort of thing. Now, lastly, there's a huge focus right now, as Jillian mentioned, there's 40% of students 40% of the jobs out there in the US can be done working remotely. What does that mean? Employers are really going to start looking and seeing for these certain skill sets, these soft skill sets, these soft skills with experience working remotely, experience successfully working remotely. And we already seeing it right now where I'm a current remote worker. I know a lot of huge companies are right now kind of being very flexible on their work from home. I know Spotify is one, a big tech company that just established a permanent work from home for the vast majority of their jobs too. So there's going to be a huge trend in this direction. So that really covers it up. I know we divided up to 15, 15, 15. We almost hit that right on the nose, a couple minutes shy, but we'd like to open it up for various questions. Let me just pull up the chat right here. If you guys do have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. If there's any specific concepts on the internships in themselves or any questions about the program, do feel free to share.
Silent crowd. We would be happy to answer any questions about how our student participation or any of the data that I previously presented in the first two sections. As noted, the presentation can be downloaded in our file drive, as well as the full paper that I didn't have full time to unpack. That takes about an hour, that you can download there as well. I did try to embed all the links of any data I pulled so that you could actually see the references and see where everything is coming from. And if you want any more information information, I'll leave the cute puppy for a second. You can always reach out to either of us. So Andy or myself, we have very easy emails. It's just our name at virtualinternships.com, or you can head to our website as well. We really love the conversation of remote work. We really love the opportunity to connect with employers around the globe and to connect with universities and students around the globe in creating more pathways to internships, because we know NACE keeps reporting out that internships are the deciding factor for hiring decisions when you're looking at two otherwise equal candidates. So we really want more students to get that first real world work experience, to understand the ambiguity of work and to really work with them. Now, we did just get a question from Kathleen about what resources do you provide employer partners when setting up the internships? And so we have a full team on staff ready to dedicate and support our students. They're what Andy noted is the intern experience manager. We have the exact same mirrored team and company experience managers. We're quite on the nose with the names, but what their job is to do is to really work with host companies to vet them, to train them, and to support them in navigating the world of remote work and that supervision that's required, that feedback and more. And so when we set up, we first go through our due diligence and the vetting, and in the second instance, go through the training and mentorship and ensure that all the partnerships create a really strong project placement plan, noting 3 to 5 projects that the students are actually going to complete during their time, the remote work skills they're going to complete, and to start that onboarding process to really get that planned and started so that the students do have a little bit of structure, more like a course at the beginning that leads into that more natural flow of the real world work experience. Erica also asked about scholarships for low income students, which Andy can really address.
So there are different opportunities, different discounts that are available depending on that sort of thing. Obviously, when it comes into partnerships with universities, we're always very there's certain discounts that can be offered to students and things along that nature too. But we do obviously do our best to provide funding when and where, if need be, or try to help these students find these various funding opportunities where it comes from university or an outside source. So, like I said, our mission is to ultimately expand and provide these opportunities for as many as possible. But when it comes to that, we do help the student when it comes to maybe providing these various discounts for the students and ultimately helping source these funding opportunities as well too. We also do run a scholarship campaign one time per year, and I know this ultimately changed. We actually did provide 10 fully funded scholarships just in these past couple months for students from really all over the world. I forget the exact number, but I believe 3 or 4, Jillian could correct me if I'm wrong, were from the US, but there was a really exciting amount of applications that came in, but we do have a full scholarship campaign that we run one time per year.
And then another question came about, do you have a template that you provide managers in designing their projects? And don't worry, you didn't miss this earlier. We didn't really discuss this, but what we have is we have a template that reviews, that's kind of just a job description template that really just articulates key skills, remote work, and the projects that the students are going to be completing. And it's quite vague, but what we did was over the past 3 years of supporting virtual internships, we were developing this huge network, as Andy noted, 3,500 different host companies and a huge plethora of project plans. And we recently actually just looked through all of the project plans to pull out key trends. And so our placements, we kind of aligned to 18 different career fields. So we've crazily taken all the majors in the world, we've taken all the industries in the world, and we've somehow mapped them to 18 standardized career fields. This is business, finance, engineering, healthcare, and pharmaceuticals, creative industries. I'm not going to name all 18, but it's all there. And what we did was we found the projects had a lot of similarities at the high level across the world, across the companies, but within each industry. And so what we have actually created was a sample of 20 to 30 projects per career field that a company can actually use as a starting point to really understand, okay, you're right, here's the key project, here's the deliverables we noted. Now let me customize it to make it real and to make it applicable to my host company. And by really kind of giving them this framework and giving them this structure, and well as looking at these projects, it's really allowing us to support our host companies better, to create a better plan and to understand the full scope of the project. the next step could be stratifying the levels of these projects, looking at, we have 25 projects for business, let's now make it 25 projects at an intermediate and advanced level. And we do have a whole host of general projects that we know that this student can complete across any career field. But we do only, we require that the majority of the placement actually be based in these career field focused projects, because we don't want a student to do engineering and for what everybody's concern is here, right, in a remote internship, that they're not actually doing engineering, they're just blogging or researching. We want actual hands-on real work experiences from behind that computer screen. So that's how we really work with host companies. We've really worked in this first sense to provide a template and then guidance on how to fill in that template and create a really strong project plan. And now we've done even more with creating a library of customizable projects that they can compile together to create that full project plan. Great question. Any other questions? All right. I think one of the cool things about this experience that I talked about is in 2020, the world was exposed to the fact that we could work remotely. I always joke that in 2018, when my co-founders came together to create virtual internships, they're like, Jillian, do you think this is a good idea? And I was like, not really. I think everybody needs to be in person. And now I feel so silly for saying that. And the concerns that a lot of people kind of reflect in that, oh, you couldn't possibly create this in-person experience the same as make this virtual experience the same as in person. But we really try to, as Andy noted, break down the barriers. And one of the key things that students qualitatively say is they loved how many connections they were able to make. We know that over 70% of jobs are filled by a network, and the ability to get in students not just experience, which we know is a deciding factor in hiring, but more network and integrated into their the company, even remotely, is really important. As the WCER report noted, we need more structure. We need more guidance around the design of internships done remotely. And we know that this structure and this need will continue on more and more. And finally, we know we just need more internships. We know that there is demand outstripping supply more and daily, and that the more that we can embed professional development and work experience in that first, second, or third year means that you get more paid internships in that fourth year, and you get more post-graduation employment success in that final year. And so anything we could do to support that and to embed courses and to build in internships, I think remote is the key to this. It breaks down a lot of the logistical barriers that were previously there with commutes, synchronous work, and more. And I'm really excited about the opportunities in the future. On our YouTube channel, we have a bunch of students' testimonials talk about it. And I think that's always just fun, but it also talks about their real world experiences. And so they're not like, I guess, blinded by the love of virtual internships as Andy and I might. And we're always happy to discuss. So like I said, on our screen, we have our emails. So please feel free to connect with us after this presentation, or to download the presentation or report connected in the conference session. If we have no more questions in 2 minutes, we're going to just close down the session. I thank you all for joining us on your busy Friday. I hope you have a wonderful weekend that's filled with sunshine, rest, and away from a computer screen. And thank you so much, Andy, for being my co-presenter.
Thank you as well, Jillian, and thank you for everybody for joining. I know it's been a very, very busy but exciting and hopefully quite successful week for all of you. So I do appreciate it. Again, do not hesitate to reach out to us for any further information, continuing the conversation, whatever the case may be. But thank you all again. And as Jillian said, please enjoy your weekend away from tech. You all deserve it.